And people are like, man, I wish I was you because I'm not that way. No, the real story is to say, man, there are days I get up and say, God, I'm enough already. I can't take another moment. When will you come and rescue me? When will you save me from all these people that are just on top of me and I can't handle it. But my story is to say, but even though I feel that, my hope is in what I believe. My hope is knowing that God is a faithful God. And God's story is that He loves me so much that it says all things will work together for God who loves me. And I know that God will rescue me. And I know that God is faithful in my life. And I know that I have eternity with Him. And I know that Christ died for me and He loves me. And even in my failures, God says, that's okay. I will not give up on you. Even when you give up on me, I will not give up on you. You are a child of mine. Therefore, you are special. And when I feel like He's left me, hope says, but I can believe He has not. And I can rejoice in His unfailing love. That's part of our story. And what makes our story special is understanding the honesty that we have of saying, this is where I was. But this is what Christ has done and is doing. And when we are willing to be honest with ourselves and in that, then it moves into what really happens then is that hope shines into their story. They're being the people around us that God puts in our path. People notice when we let the power of Christ work in our life. People notice how we behave. That's why Peter says you got to have a clear conscience. You got to be, you got to be treating people with love and respect. You've got to be, your behavior in such a way as that they cannot hold it in and call you a hypocrite. Basically, is what he's saying. This idea of conscience can be compared to a window that lets light in. That our conscience lets the truth of Christ into our thoughts and our actions in a way that we make decisions based on a good conscience. And we don't have to have some rule book of 1,000 things to do and think, boy, I hope I can, in any situation, know the right thing to do. We have a clear conscience. Then we allow the Holy Spirit to speak to us through His Word and through other ways to where we know what is to do at the right time. And we live our life that way, in real and honest ways, where people notice that we are there is something in us that God that is at work bigger than who I am or who you are, that people are drawn to. We often don't even realize how much our life impacts others. Bill Hybels, in his book, Contagious Christian, he shared a letter that was written by a newer Christian to a person that influenced their life, really unbeknownst to them. And this is what the letter said. You know, when we met, I began to discover a new vulnerability, a warmth and a lack of pretense that impressed me. I saw in you a thriving spirit, no signs of internal stagnation anywhere. I could tell you were a growing person. I like that. I saw you had a strong self-esteem, not based on a fluff of self-help books, but on something a whole lot better. I saw that you lived by convictions and priorities, not just by convenience, selfish pleasures, and financial gain. And I had never met anyone like that before. I felt a depth of love and concern as you listened to me and didn't judge me. You tried to understand me, you sympathized, and you celebrated with me. You demonstrated kindness and generosity, and not just for me, but for other people as well. And you stood for something. You were willing to go against the grain of society and follow what you believed to be true, no matter what people said, and no matter what it cost you. And for those reasons and a whole host of others, I found myself really wanting what you had. Now that I've become a Christian, I wanted to write to tell you I'm grateful for beyond words for how you lived out your Christian life in front of me. End of quote. What was that person saying in that letter? They were saying that in their place of darkness, they saw hope in a person who was living out their life transparently. And they saw something that was at work that they wanted. This mature Christian in their life was shining light. And shining this message of hope. And so therefore, they were drawn to that. We need to be aware that God orchestrates divine moments in our life. People are scared, facing uncertain futures, illnesses, possible death. They don't know how to handle it. They have no hope. They've lost someone that they loved, a child or a miscarriage, and it's shaken their world, and they don't know what to do. But you do. Each and every one of us, in our own story and our own context, might know what to do in that situation. And we have to be prepared in that moment to share our story. We have to be willing to fill out, our cardboard and say, here's what happened in my life. And then this is what Christ did. The beauty of a community of believers of a church is that as we hear each other's stories, I come across someone who's had a miscarriage, and I know that I'm not the one to really reach out to this person. I can give them words. But this other person I know of could be far more powerful because they can share their own testimony of what Christ had done in their life, in that dark place of their own experience of miscarriage, how they were able to be lifted up by Christ and restored. That speaks volumes, far more than anything I can do reading out of the Bible. Because their life becomes that testimony. That's how God wants to reach people. That's how God plans to reach people. And each and every one of us need to be able to really process that and understand, what is God, how is God using my life to be a light? Listen to these words from Psalm 40, 1-3. It says, I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and He heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on a rock and He gave me a firm place to stand. And then verse 3, He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. That psalmist is describing cardboard testimonies. That psalmist is describing God at work. How the story of the light of God's story shines out through us to where others are drawn to it and see it. And he reminds us that God is at work in us and through us. We don't have to act on our own and think, oh man, how do I do this? Peter says, we just need to be prepared when God does do it. We need to be transparent so people see God doing it in our life. And we need to be willing to give an answer when people ask. So the challenge for us is to say, how bright does hope shine in your life or in my life? Maybe you are living in the area of feelings versus beliefs. And you need to be reminded of God's story. You need to be able to spend the time looking in the area of belief, of saying, this is what God says. This is what God tells me. This is what God did for me. And I need to get myself back to a place of holding on to what I believe and putting my hope in that. Maybe you've forgotten your own story. Many of us probably don't even take the time to really pause and even think about it. I mean, particularly when we've kind of moved past the drama of it. And life has gotten comfortable, and then all of a sudden we forget, oh, wait a minute. What was life like before I had Jesus in my life? What was it about the message of the gospel in my life that caused me to be willing to give up control to Him or to allow Him to be a part of it? And how has my life changed as a result of it? What do other people say about your life based on your faith? What would they say if they were to write, a cardboard cutout for you or a letter? What would it be that they would say about your life? I want to encourage us all not to let our light diminish, God's light in us diminish, by focusing on ourselves. That's not what it's about. When we focus on this life, we miss the real message of the gospel, which is our hope is in the future of what God is doing. Our hope is in the eternity that we spend with Him. Our hope is in the belief that God will continues to work His mission through us, and that we are here for a purpose. And that as we sit here today, that there are people we will come in contact with today or tomorrow or the next day, that God is saying, your story, applies to this person. Be ready, because I want to use it. For that to happen, we have to be ready. It requires us to rethink our priorities. It requires us to ask ourselves, am I keeping my life to myself, or am I allowing myself to be transparent enough so other people see it? Am I so engaged in my schedule and my time in my life and the things that I do not allow time for God to be able to take me into places of darkness so that my light shine? I mean, it doesn't do any good to shine a light in a lit room. And for many of us, the issue is we don't get close enough to the dark to let light shine through us. And so how am I allowing God to put me in places where I can be in darkness and then be ready for Him to be used, to give a response, an answer when people ask the question, what is it in you that makes it, that I want whatever you have? I invite us all to really pause and say, God, how can I shine hope? I'm going to end in prayer here, and I know it seems unbelievable it's before 11, but I'm going to. I could stand around for a little while if you like, but no, I because this isn't really about a study. This isn't about okay, let's really examine the text and dig down and deep and stuff. I mean, you can do that this week. But the real message of this whole series about Streetlight is saying, where are your lights shining? How are we, by coming together and focused as light, impacting the world around us and the people around us? I mean, there's obvious places like feeding the homeless and stuff like that, but there's more subtle places of darkness around us, like marriages that are failing, or people in financial despair, or people in deep need that need help that we live right next door to, that are moments of darkness where God's saying, you are the light that I want to send there. And maybe it isn't you. Maybe you're the connection to that family, but there's someone else in this church that can be a great connection that we need to be sharing and knowing about, so I can say, you know what? I'm going to have a party. You're invited, and I'm going to invite these other couple people over, and we come together and let you connect and let God do His thing, taking His story through your story into the life of someone else's story. That's the powerful message. That's why these things become so powerful. One of the cards sit there, simply said, he says, I was lost, and now I'm found. That's the heart of what the message of the gospel is all about. That whether we're lost in the fear of the future or the sickness, whether we're lost in the addictions of alcohol or drugs, whether we're lost in the anger that controls us in relationships, whether we're lost in the pursuit of money or success or worldly possessions, whatever we're lost in, the beauty of the gospel is that Christ goes into that place and He saves us. And He stands ready to do that. But for whatever reason, God says, I'm not going to do it alone. I'm going to take you and you or you or you or you or any one of us, and says, I'm going to do it through one of us. And that's how He does it. And so we need to be ready. And so I want to pray, and after I pray through the song, as we sing, just as an act, again, a symbolic act of saying, God, I want to be a light that shines. I want to shine hope. I want to allow and open up. Maybe for the first time, I'm going to let my story be used by you. I invite you to come forward and put a light up and let that light shine. And as we let those lights shine, the cross shines brighter. I mean, that's the gospel message, a beautiful message for us to be reminded of. And the challenge is going out this week. And one of the things in the take-home is to say, take the time to write out God's story and your story and how God might use that, so you are ready to share that story. Others of us would gladly help you to come together to figure out what that story is. It's so important. And I know Scott and I both have talked about, these are great stories, but every one of us has, we could do our own, morning of testimonies and we hope to do that more, where people share our stories because they're powerful. And even imagine, those are powerful, but imagine if they're one of you doing that, how powerful they are, because you know the person. And you can remember the before and after, and you're thinking, man, look what God has done.